Welcome to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
The Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
The Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
The Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
The Anxiety Coaches Podcast. A fun and conversational show
where two coaches teach you
about anxiety, panic, and PTSD.
and how you can overcome them for life.
Aloha and welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Ryan, and I have a very special guest with me today that I am excited about, and I know after you hear this you're going to say, what a great guest Gina had. I have Rick Hanson, PhD, today, and before we get into talking to Rick, as usual, I want to thank all of you for being here week after week, podcast after podcast, and supporting us in order for us to help others. It's those 5-star reviews that you leave us over there on iTunes that keep us so visible that anyone out there searching for anxiety help, panic help, PTSD help can see that the podcast exists and they can jump on and listen and search the archives to find something that suits them. And we appreciate you helping us help others. So, before I go any further and bring Rick on, I have to be sure to mention that if the podcasts and the free Facebook group are not quite enough for what you're needing for healing, at this time, you can send us an email at anxietycoachespodcast@gmail.com, and we can point you in the right direction into either our one-on-one coaching or our group 2-call-a-month coaching program. And today we're actually going to talk with Rick, too, about a program that he has that I fully endorse and think it would be fabulous for anyone who is listening to this podcast. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Rick Hanson, PhD. He's a psychologist, a senior fellow at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, and New York Times best-selling author. His books include Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain, Just One Thing, and Mother Nurture. He edits the Wise Brain Bulletin and has several audio programs. A summa cum laude graduate of UCLA and founder of the Wellspring Institute for Neuroscience and Contemplative Wisdom. He's an avid speaker at Oxford. He's been an invited speaker, at Oxford, Stanford, and Harvard, and taught in meditation centers worldwide. His work has been featured on BBC, CBS, and NPR. And he offers the free Just One Thing newsletter with over 110,000 subscribers. Wow. Plus, he has this program I was just mentioning. It's an online program entitled Foundations of Well-Being. It's a program in positive neuroplasticity, and we will talk more about that as we go along. Welcome, Rick Hanson.
Well, I'm really, really happy to be here. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. Tell us about this program, just to get us started before I get into my questions for you. Give us a little outline of it. Yeah.
Very briefly, it's an online experiential program grounded in brain science and super practical. It's really about how to use simple, effective things you can do in everyday life to grow resources inside yourself. In other words, to grow more, capacities inside, to experience calm strength, let's say, or relaxation, or more rapid recovery from setbacks, or feel more deeply cared about, or feel more able to be at peace with other people. So we take about an hour or so a week over the course of roughly a year, and people can do it at their own pace. They can speed up or slow down however they like. And the program itself is unbelievably rich with resources. No one complains that there's too little in the program. If they ever complain,
it's amazing.
It's that, oh my God, I think of it honestly as the encyclopedia of well-being. And so you can find out about it. Just go to my website, rickhanson.net, or go to the Anxiety Coaches podcast page, theanxietycoachespodcast.com, and you'll see on the sidebar there a little box ad for the Practical Neuroscience of Happiness, Love, and Wisdom, which is the subtitle of the Foundations of Wellbeing program. And if you just click on that link, it'll take you to information about the program. So that's enough to say about it for now.
Yeah, yes. Well, the reason I wanted to bring it up early on is because everything that you just mentioned and everything in those 12 pillars that is in this program is everything we talk about here. Mm-hmm. It's what we talk about on our Facebook group. It's the issues that come up. And so it just wanted everybody to know that, like, you're our guy. You really, you fit in so well here with us. So
well, thank you. And I'm anxious by temperament and have been deeply interested in fear, broadly defined, the whole range of it, from very subtle uneasiness to full-blown panic and terror. I'm very interested in that whole spectrum from the standpoint of, healing, well-being, and personally spiritual practice.
Yeah, yes. I love bringing in the spiritual practice of it too. It's one of the things that helped me move along the most, was deepening a spiritual practice. All the other pieces were all still necessary too, but maybe that was my little cornerstone. I'm not sure, but it really has served me, not only in getting out of my anxiety state that I had been in, Rick, for probably 20 years. I had a long journey. It was way before the internet, and all I had were library books. So it was deepening that meditation, that calm, centering, learning mindfulness on my own, and then eventually branching out and finding my people. Yeah. So, and there are a lot of the people that are in your program. So, Tara Brach and Sharon Salzberg, these are all people that have very much informed not only my life, but my healing. So, and so fear firsthand also.
Oh, yeah.
This is interesting. Yeah.
In ways large and small. I mean, it's a chosen situation, but for example, I've done a lot of rock climbing. And maybe I'll tell a little story from rock climbing that was a great teaching for me, if that's okay, about fear. So briefly, when I was first rock climbing, I was in my early 20s, mid-20s, and I'd go with my friends, and we'd climb all day, and then we'd come back to the campground and, hang out and go to sleep, and then do it again the next day. And there was a particular day, or evening rather, early on in my learning to be a climber, in which I would be starting to fall asleep, and I'd start moving into kind of sort of a dream. It wasn't quite a dream. It was more an image. And it was an intense image of me falling down the side of a 1,000-foot cliff, heading fast for the flat boulders, to splatter at the bottom. And I would immediately, just before I hit the boulders, I'd like, whoa, pull myself out of it. Like, whoa, that's weird. I didn't like that, So I go, oh, that was strange. So then I started falling back to sleep again. And there I was again, tumbling through the air, flashing past this gray granite cliff, heading for the boulders at the bottom. Whoa, I pulled out again. And that happened, several times. And finally, I got, sort of like, what am I going to do about this? And at that point, I was beginning to develop a personal growth orientation to life altogether. So I said to myself, well, scary, sure, but open to it and see what happens. So then as I fell asleep, I let myself tumble through space, heading for the boulders, willing to splatter on them, knowing rationally that I wasn't actually going to die. That helped me do this in my imagery. And tumbling through space, aiming for the boulders, willing to splash, and boom, just before I hit the boulders, I had this realization. that what had happened was that over the course of the day of climbing, including what's called leading, so you're above your points of protection, and if you fall, you can go 20, 40, 50 feet or more. It's kind of scary. As a young climber, I had totally suppressed my fear. I had pushed it down, and then in the phrase from Sigmund Freud, the return of the repressed, the fear I shoved down hard, bubbled back up again when I was in a more relaxed, vulnerable, permeable kind of space or state as I was falling asleep, and it all came up again. And I learned a great lesson from that we need to, as they say in Zen, be with our mind like the skillful rider of a horse, neither too loose nor too tight a rein. I needed to, as I was climbing, open to sort of appropriate and understandable amounts of anxiety without being flooded by it. That would be too loose a rein, nor suppressing it, which would be too tight a rein. And as a result, that shifted my relationship to anxiety. I began to realize that anxiety is an experience like any other. But as the years went on, and I'm older now, I don't know about wiser, but definitely older. And as I became a psychologist, and then got deeply engaged with neuroscience and evolution, and also contemplative practice, I came to realize that while we're designed in a way to be anxious, that actually most of our anxiety is unnecessary, and it doesn't actually tell us anything useful. And much of the time we can be with it and let it flow. We don't need to be hijacked by it, but we don't need to be ruled by it. And as an experience, it tends to be privileged in awareness. In other words, it's unlike most experiences. If a moment of hurt flows through your mind, hurt, I don't like it, I can let it go. Irritation, I get it, they're jerks, grumble, move on, okay? But fear, or related emotions like disgust, whoa, that might be a threat. Something might be about to eat me. Or in my social group, my primate band or human band or my life today, whoa, someone might be about to hit me or cheat on me or hurt me or attack me or make fun of me or dismiss me or not listen to me. Whoa. So we tend to privilege their fear. But if we can come to appreciate that fear is unpleasant, it's not like we would want someone to feel anxious. In the same way, it's okay to wish that we weren't anxious. But most of the time, fear is like a car alarm. It's annoying. It's unpleasant. You'd rather be listening to the birds or your music or reading your book without that blap, 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 blap car alarm going off. But most of the time, there's a term in psychology, signal anxiety. Most fear is not signal. It's just noise. And that was a great lesson I learned, rock climbing.
Oh my gosh, that's a beautiful story.
Oh, thank you.
There's a lot of points in there. I don't even know where to start. Oh my goodness. I love this. Fear is noise.
Yeah. Obviously, if it's telling us something useful, okay. Like we get that creepy feeling about that person. Don't go on a second date, or you get that funny feeling inside, I really need to check my bank because I think I might be getting overdrawn. Okay, do that. Or inside you've got this funny intuition. For me as a longtime therapist, mother's intuition is gold. You got this funny feeling that your kid's actually not really happy behind her happy, her smiley face. Or you have this funny thought that your teenager, is getting stoned every day when he goes off to school. Listen to those things, But on the whole, you're right. Most in this moment, and this is such a practical thing. It's a practice I do routinely, and you can do it right now as a listener. In this moment, look directly. Is your body basically all right now? And you all together, are you basically all right now? It's probably not a perfect moment. There might be some pain. There might be some worry. The body might be hurting. But basically, is there enough air to breathe? Is there an ongoingness of living in a very primal way? Do you have enough water to drink? Is there enough food, in your refrigerator? In this moment, hopefully no shark is chewing on your leg. Hopefully you're not in agonizing pain. Hopefully not, no terrible thing is happening right now. You may not have been basically all right in the past. You may not be basically all right in the future. Life can be challenging and difficult, okay, for sure. But in this moment, for most people, most seconds of most days, they're perfectly all right. You're all right. And when you recognize the fact that your body is telling you, like the calls of a night watchman, all is well. It's not perfect, but it's basically okay. Whoa. You realize you can afford to let go of needless anxiety, letting go of unnecessary tension, unnecessary apprehensiveness, unnecessary bracing, and whatever anxiety remains that you know rationally is unreasonable, it's not helpful, it's needless suffering, at least you don't need to identify with it. At least you can step back from it, and also definitely don't fuel it. Don't, keep adding rumination or looping round and round the track of worry. And instead, notice the fact in this moment, right now, like the last 2 minutes, I'm on this little riff here, you've been basically all right. I bet you every single second of the last 2 minutes listening here, you've been basically all right. Not great, maybe not perfect, but basically okay. No basis for fear. Nothing is threatening you in this instant. Isn't that profound? Undisturbed, undefended, unthreatened, undistracted, right now.
The beautiful piece of that, Rick, is that that's so true, and for such a huge amount of our minutes of our days. And when something really big does happen, we're usually able to handle it.
That's wonderfully true. Wonderfully true to get. I think about, like, my background as a developmentalist, children, and we've had 2 kids. I was a kid. I remember my childhood really well, and I've worked a lot with kids. And when you're a kid, and this is often true for situations in which people learned fear. I mean, we're designed to learn from our experiences, especially negative experiences in childhood. We're designed. That's how the brain is designed, okay? So if you've had painful, difficult experiences, or you had sort of like vicarious trauma, you saw things happen to other people, it's natural to have acquired a fearfulness, especially if those events that you experienced or saw or imagined landed on a sensitive or otherwise vulnerable temperament or constitution. Maybe there were other issues like physical health problems and so forth. Okay. So given that, though, right, thinking about children, or maybe it happened when you were an adult, or maybe it happened during a combat tour or a particular situation, or when you were, walking down a dark street. First, bad things happened often, right? As a kid, it was routine. You were stuck in bad situations. The other kids in school, your siblings, your parents, your caregivers, whatever it was, the social milieu, growing up in poverty, targeted by racism. Lots of bad things happened. All right. Second, they hit you really hard because you were a kid. Let's talk about being a kid. Of course, you feel things keenly. You don't have the regulatory systems that develop over the lifespan, especially by your 30th birthday, in your nervous system. And third, you didn't have much coping mechanisms. You were stuck. You didn't have ways of managing your own reactions. You also didn't have a credit card. You couldn't whip it out, rent a car and say, see you later, jerks. You know what I mean? And get out of there and get away. You didn't have any resources. But as an adult, think about those 3 things. First of all, what's the actual likelihood of the dreaded experience occurring? It's probably pretty low because you're out of those scenes, to some extent at least. And again, I'm not trying to paint a pretty picture. I don't believe in positive thinking. I believe in realistic thinking. We're not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. We're trying to see the whole mosaic of reality clearly, but with a brain that is kind of designed, because that's what worked in evolution, to focus on the negative. All right. So first, we need to recognize that in most cases, the odds today of a bad event are much lower than when we were, fill in the blank, serving that tour of duty in Iraq, or in that bad marriage, or with that horrible boss, or stuck in that particular childhood. Second, if it did happen, it would be unpleasant. wouldn't be nice. We wouldn't like it. But, a day or 2 or 3, probably. And again, I'm not trying to minimize anything whatsoever. I'm just speaking in reality. Usually we don't feel it so keenly as adults. We have more internal shock absorbers and buffers, where our lives are more complex. We move on to the next thing. Typically, it doesn't hit us so hard. And third, however, if it does happen, and it does hit us hard, we still have many more coping, as you were saying a moment ago, coping resources than we had when we were children. And knowing all that gives us an authentic confidence and an authentic cultivation, appropriately, of a certain fearlessness when we move through life. One of the things I routinely do when I'm with other people, I'm doing it right on this call, right now, this podcast, is there actually the basis for fear now, here and now? No, Gina's not going to attack me. I don't know Gina well. You're, relatively a stranger. A lot of threats came through strangers, but you're a nice person. I can relax. Worst case scenario, I just disconnect from the podcast. It's okay. I don't need to freak out about it. And so I myself routinely do this practice with other people, especially because that's where a lot of our fears arise in the modern world, where I just again and again look. Am I actually being threatened in this moment? Or even if I'm actually being threatened, there is a challenge. There is some sort of threat on the space or hazard I'm actually dealing with. Can I remain peaceful about it? Do I need to be upset about it? If I'm driving next to some big truck on the freeway, yeah, I'm alert. Yeah, my heart's beating a little faster. That's appropriate. I'm coping. But I don't need to feel bothered by the fact that I'm right there next to that truck. And that's a way we can have of going through life.
Yeah.
What do you think? Hopefully I'm not blathering on too much.
Oh, you are not at all. It's exactly where people are at. And the next question then comes up is how do like the people I deal with and the calls that we get or the emails, they get this intellectually. Yeah. Right? What you're saying. And then they will still go about and have that pounding heart, sweaty palms. And so what do you say is the piece that needs to come in order to put that all together? The understanding of it intellectually and actually getting it in the heart.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Fundamentally, you're talking about learning. In a broad sense, not memorizing the state capitals or something, but learning in a broad sense, emotional learning, body learning, somatic learning, motivational learning related to desires and values and aspirations, and intentions, learning social learning, interpersonal learning love, right? Becoming more, learning how to love at will, which, my wife's wonderful. And, in any long marriage, we've got 34 years recently under our belt. Wow. You need to love at will sometimes. Yes. Sorry. So my point about that is, how do we learn? We learn from having experiences of what we wish to learn that we take in. So if you want to bring this intellectual understanding into your body through repeated experiences of, for example, relaxing as you exhale, which is natural because technically what's called the parasympathetic wing of the nervous system regulates exhalation, and that wing of the nervous system is the so-called rest and digest and relax wing of the nervous system. It helps us naturally calm down. So tune into your exhalations. Notice how you naturally calm down a little bit. Your heartbeat slows a little bit during the exhalation. It speeds up a little in the inhalation. Feel it in your body. When you recognize that your body right now is telling you that you're all right, there is a going on of being. You're going on living. And ongoing livingness is actually being communicated up into your brain. Listen to it. Listen to your inner night watch person, if you will, who's telling you that all is well, fundamentally and basically. Feel it. Feel that you're actually all right now, again and again and again. I jokingly say 10,000 times, 10 seconds at a time. In other words, right, little things add up over time. So you want to feel that you're all right. You want to feel the letting go of unnecessary guarding or bracing, and then see what happens. And do it in baby steps. It's very appropriate. One step up the ladder at a time. Let go a little bit and see if it's okay. A lot of people are afraid of not being anxious. In other words, they're afraid that if they're not vigilant, anxious, uneasy, and so forth, tense, tight, and playing small, whack, they'll lower their guard, and that's when they'll be hurt and attacked. And maybe because that's what did happen when they were, say, younger. But so these days, recognize that you can do both. Like in my rock climbing story, I could be both vigilant about threat and mildly keyed up because I didn't want to fall. I did not want to slip and fall, while at the same time recognizing that I'm okay. I can do this. I'm skillfully moving through this crack, or more generally, I'm moving through this tricky conversation with this other person. I'm driving on this freeway next to the truck, and it's okay. I'm, in this awkward dinner in which I'm stuck. My jerk of a brother-in-law is always finding fault with me, and I don't need to listen to the guy. I can turn down the volume, in his own little his podcast. I can dial it down. In other words, to feel it, to recognize it. Oh, and my point is, and I'll finish on this little point. I don't want to blather on. In other words, you can take a little step of relaxing and opening, realizing that you can remain aware of potential threats or hazards around you while still feeling a kind of calm strength inside, strong enough to deal with it and also calm and fundamentally at peace. And then you go, okay, I'll take the next step, and I'll do an experiment. Does something bad happen when I recognize even more deeply that in this moment, at least, there's no basis for threat, right? There might be a basis for caution, but I don't need to, there's no basis for fear. There might be the basis for caution. There might be the basis for prudence, or taking skillful action, or making a plan. A good plan binds anxiety. Know what your plan is, if only inside, your own mind. If you can't change what's around you, at least, work with what's inside your own mind. There might be a basis for a good plan, for alertness, for caution, and so forth, but there need not be a basis for fear.
Yeah. Now that's important. That idea that those are different things.
And then over time, what happens? And I did it myself, 10,000 times, 10 seconds at a time. Maybe it's only 1,000. But anyway, it's a lot. There's a technical term in neuropsychology, Mobettah. In other words, more better. In other words, Mobettah. More episodes of learning. In other words, of growth, of development, of healing, of positive change. And then more episodes of more depth of engagement, rather, in those episodes of learning. And as you do it, then you go further and further and further up the ladder. Increasingly, quoting the Buddha here, he says, one who can just recite the teachings is not called wise. One who is peaceable, friendly, and fearless is called wise. Isn't that great? I just love the combination.
That's
peaceable,
beautiful.
Friendly, and fearless.
Yeah. Yes. And that we can get to that fearlessness with time.
That's right. Over time. And
it's not a light switch that you just get a piece of information and you flip the switch and you're done.
And it could well be that your nature is mildly anxious. And so there's this background trickle. It's noise. It's like a car alarm going off. It doesn't mean anything. But it's there. It's mildly unpleasant. Some people are mildly melancholic. Some people are kind of mildly irritable, a little prickly by their temperament. Other people are sort of, mildly calm by their nature, whatever it is. There might still be. And, if a person had a terrible traumatic history, and I want to be so clear here, I'm not trying to minimize a darn thing, and okay, maybe it's your nature to be particularly sensitive to being around authority figures. Or maybe it's your nature to not do well in noisy environments or with frequent interruptions or loud banging noises going on around you. That's not good for you. Okay, do what you can to, protect that trick knee, as it were. Do what you can to rehab that trick knee. Do what you can to get braces around it in terms of your inner practices. You're developing inner resources, inner shock absorbers, understandings, a variety of things. Certainly do that part. And also if you can, avoid those situations that hit you hard at your trichiny, and then you go forward in life. And maybe, of the 5,000 things a person can do in life, you can only do 4,950. But still life can be, or maybe you can only do 4,000 period, but still life is full of opportunity.
Absolutely. My goodness, Rick, that is ending us on such a beautiful, upbeat note.
Good.
Life is still colorful and so many things we can do, even when we take care of ourselves within the structure that our temperament is. And I'm really appreciating you sharing so much with us today. Do you have any last words before we close out our podcast? Maybe one last tip or something for people who are generally suffering daily with not being able to move forward because of being in that fear state all the time?
I think there are 3 great ways to practice. And I'll say them, and as I say them, if you're listening, you might ask yourself, what are you strong at, and what is an opportunity? So the 3 great ways to engage the mind usefully are to let be, let go, and let in. So as anxieties or fears or upset arises, can you be with it? Can you step back from it, hold it in mindful awareness, and let it be, not identified with it, not fueling it, observing it? It's not pleasant, but you're not captured by it or swept away by it. Can you do that? Also, can you let it go? Can you take some long exhalations? A wonderful, skillful means is to take several breaths in which the exhalation is roughly twice as long as the inhalation. That will force activation of the parasympathetic wing of the nervous system, which is naturally calming. Can you release tension from your body? Can you challenge beliefs that are not good for you or other people, that are overly catastrophizing or overly generalizing or overly self-critical, for example? Letting go. And there are other kinds of letting go as well. Can you let go of certain efforts to, be on a lifelong quest to get blood from a stone, because that is the script from your childhood, and instead let go of certain kinds of projects or certain kinds of relationships or certain kinds of fantasies that somehow you'll be fine in your retirement, even if you haven't saved any money. There are a lot of forms of useful letting go, right? Letting go of attachment to the outcome, letting go of other people having the thoughts you wish they would have, or the intentions towards you wish they would have, or the feelings towards you wish they would have. Letting go. And, and also letting go of unwholesome desires. If you're eating too much, drinking too much, smoking too much, shopping too much, gambling too much, whatever it might be, as a way to self-medicate, letting go of that as well, on problematic desires. And then also, very important, let in. Sometimes people can get so caught up, I've definitely been this way, in fixing something, fixing their trauma, working through the PTSD, clearing those negative beliefs, whatever, that they forget to let in. The mind is like a garden, 1, you can witness a garden, 2, pull weeds, 3, plant flowers. And a lot of people are pretty good at witnessing the garden, observing it mindfully, or pulling weeds, letting go of what's problematic and painful, but they're not very focused on planting flowers, cultivating what is pleasurable, enjoyable, and beneficial and wholesome in their mind and heart. So look for those little opportunities as you move through your day. What else could I notice around me that's a good fact? In an imperfect world, there are many, many things that are still beautiful. Flowers are blooming, chocolate tastes great, children are laughing. As the Dalai Lama said, if you can be happy that others are happy, you'll always be happy, because there's always somebody somewhere who's happy, somewhere around the world. Gratitude for things like, fresh water, flush toilets, refrigeration, ibuprofen, the Golden State Warriors. I live in just north of San Francisco. It's a good time to like basketball. Take in the good of other people, the kindness in the face of another person, the relief that a bad thing you feared would happen didn't happen. Take in the recognition of your own good heart, your own warm-heartedness, your own decency, your own good intentions, your own abilities, your own hard-won efforts, and the fruits of them over time. Grow that as well. So that's it. And if you're upset about something, that gives you a little roadmap. You start with letting be. You don't fight it. You explore it. You open to it. Maybe you can only bear it briefly and then you move on. Other times you really stay with it longer, whatever feels right. And then there's a natural movement into letting go, moving into releasing, dropping it, venting, disengaging. And then there's the letting in, the replacing what you've released with some positive, wholesome alternative. And that gives us a roadmap. And what I would say to finish is to really appreciate the fact, Mobettah, that a few times a day at least, and 10 seconds here, 30 seconds there, and maybe a time or two a day that's actually longer, like some formal practice, like a minute of grace at a meal, or some gratitude reflections just before falling asleep, or being really meditative when you walk your dog in the morning, or sit more formally. That these efforts, which usually in most people's lives amount to 10 minutes or less a day, but they're real effort. Those real efforts will add up over time. Just a traditional quote I think about a lot. It goes like this, and I'll finish here. Think not lightly of good, saying, it will not come to me. Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills oneself with good.
Oh, Rick, that is beautiful.
Well, I didn't make it. I didn't write it, so.
I know, but you shared it, and we are grateful for that. Thank you. And thank you for these amazing words of wisdom today. This has been so helpful. And one last time before we spring you loose, where can my listeners find you?
Rick Hanson, son.net. There you can find chock full of resources, many of which are relevant to anxiety or related issues. And also you can see on that website, rickhanson.net, like I said, full of freely offered resources. You can see information about the Foundations of Wellbeing program, which, because it's incredibly rich with resources, if you can afford it, it's about $250 or so. If you can afford it, great. But if, there's any kind of financial hardship, we love giving away scholarships. We love it. And we have nearly 1,000 people already doing it for free.
Oh, beautiful, Rick. I love hearing that because we don't want to leave anyone behind because of money. And another thing they can do is to sign up for your Just One Thing newsletter. I've been reading it for years.
Thank you. It's freely offered. You can always unsubscribe. I'll never give your email address to anybody except people who work for me, And it's a simple practice every week. It's funny, the one this week is actually a source of anxiety for many people. It's called Be at Peace with the Pain of Others. Yeah.
Tough one.
Another one I just did, I'm just looking at the titles for fun right now. Relax Anxiety About Imperfection. That's right.
Another tough one.
Be patient, love freely, keep going, pause, water your fruit tree. That all seems pretty relevant. So each week it's very short. It's short and sweet. It's just one thing.
It is short and sweet, but again, it's like those drops of water. It makes a difference. It really does.
Right.
Mobettah. Actually, that's commonly said here in Hawaii. So
that's very interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Rick Hanson, thank you so much for being with us today. Oh, my goodness. I hope everyone is enjoying this. I know some of you are going to listen to this over and over again, as you do with some of our great podcasts. And I want to thank everyone again for being with us. And Rick, all of my listeners, as I can be their representative for a moment, we say thank you very, very, very much. And we hope that you have a wonderful weekend coming up. And until we all meet again, may everyone be well and aloha.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
Find more at anxietycoachespodcast.com. We'll see you next time.